application security continues to be a key area of focus for security practitioners, development teams, and business leaders. That's because secure software is central to many of the opportunities businesses are looking to seize on today, be it shifting to offer products or services through an online channel or digitizing consumer experiences. With me today to discuss reconnaissance, specifically how companies can defend against an adversary utilizing brute forcing techniques designed to gain info about an application and its data, are my colleagues Swapnil and Maxwell. Swapnil, for those who are unfamiliar, can you explain a little bit about how an adversary might proceed in brute forcing an application and what their aims might be?
Sure. So an adversary would always try to identify your software assets that you have exposed externally and try to either cause a brand infringement through it, or would try to exfiltrate any information that they could without the proper authentication itself. One of the common methods that we have seen in order to find this low-hanging fruits are normally through brute forcing, which is taking a word list and running it against either the subdomains or to identify URIs or to identify the parameters itself, which would give them a better insight into what third-party applications do they have, or are there any unauthenticated pages that they have, what kind of a CMS solutions that they're using, and try to identify if there is any mapping issues for those third-party applications or software assets, or improper authentication is causing any leakage of information itself. So that's the low-hanging fruit that normally an adversary would try to use. So on that, Max, since you've been leading our penetration testing engagements, do you have any anecdotes that you can share about it?
Yeah, Recon work is critical. It allows us to better tailor our attacks for a better chance for successful exploitation. So for one of our cases, we had a target that was a large technology organization, and our goal was to try to identify any third-party vendors behind the firewall. And then by using URI brute forcing, we identified some documentation in system files. And then from there, we did some more investigation on those files, and we found that they were related to Adobe Experience Manager software. And then from here, we took it a next step and then looked up CVEs for that vendor and found a critical on it. And then after that, we were able to exploit it and get remote code execution on the server. So that really serves as a great scenario and example of how we were able to lead from recon work all the way into exploitation. And then another situation, our target was a large fintech organization. We selected one of the target's domains as our first point of investigation. We first performed subdomain brute forcing and then found a few valid hosts. And then from there, we took that list and performed URI brute forcing on each of those subdomains. And then in one of those instances, we found an internal application with employee information. We were able to navigate through it without the need for authentication and even managed to pull contact information and the entire corporate structure. This information could be made useful to perform a phishing campaign in an attempt to social engineer our way into the network. And on that note, as organizations begin to adopt microservices as the new norm, we've also seen a lot of cases of improper authentication and authorization for those microservices. In another situation, we did recon on a Fortune 500 company to discover exposed microservices. We found information disclosure regarding to customer and payment information systems that could lead to brand infringement for the organization. And with that, let's hand it back to Ryan for any follow-up questions.
Sure, Max. I think it'd be helpful for anyone who's just getting into this topic to understand a little bit more about how we as security practitioners go about seeing what's out there from a brute forcing perspective.
Yeah, so we use a lot of different types of tools, but when we start the recon process, the first thing is to gather as much public information first about that target. So that starts from gathering domains owned by the organization and just getting an understanding of what types of data they handle, services they offer, and those types of things. From there, we'll use brute forcing tools with a custom word list that we've developed from our own engagements. And we use this list to perform tests like subdomain enumeration, URI brute forcing, and parameter brute forcing. In addition to this, we also leverage different types of tools such as port scanning tools, vulnerability scanning, and OS fingerprinting to get a better idea of what technologies are in use. And if the organization has any consumer applications, we set up a man-in-the-middle proxy to understand how that application actually interacts with the backend. But overall, any publicly available information is just used to understand the organization's infrastructure a little bit better. And with that, Swapnil, how can organizations better protect themselves from active reconnaissance?
Sure. So there are multiple ways on how we can mitigate against reconnaissance. One common tree is by providing us with a generic error message across the board, irrespective of whether the domain or whether the subdomains or URIs or parameters is present or not. To give you an example of that, we found that there was a Fortune 500 company that had an page that would give you access to AWS keys and other information along with it, provided that you have a certain parameter available within the URI itself. Now, in production, that should have not been the case, because now you're leaking out information about your non-production environment or your interworking of the application itself. So by providing a generic error messages or by removing parameters that should not have been there at the first place itself is a common mitigation path. In addition, there are modern frameworks that are providing a solution against active reconnaissance on an ongoing basis. That could be right from rate limiting to making sure that you have generic error messages back to the user irrespective of whether it's present or not, provided that you have hidden it properly. However, it needs an internal developers to activate that properly to make sure that it's not leaking out any information. So those are the two common mitigation paths. But obviously there are different frameworks and different ways on how we can configure it. That's where I think so there has to be some sort of security efficacies that needs to be imbibed within development lifecycle to identify those. So Max, that's how we can basically mitigate against attacks like reconnaissance.
Awesome. Well, every organization is going to be a little bit different. So for more information about how you can better protect your organization from active reconnaissance, please contact us here at Certus Cybersecurity. We're happy to provide guidance as trusted advisors in the industry and as experienced white hat hackers. And this is our first of our video series. So if there are any other topics that you'd like for us to cover, please leave a comment below. And then also we can try to discuss them in our next video. Thank you very much.